Good morning or afternoon, wherever and whenever you're listening to this. I'm Christopher Saul, and of course, we have with us our guest, Jonathan Tallman. He's the head of the Tallman Group, and we're going to talk about two pretty different things today. The first thing being, of course, his ability to travel to the most amazing places on earth really inexpensively. He's got this gift that he's been honing, I feel like, since you said, I think you were 18 or 19. And then we'll talk a lot about politics because Jonathan is also really plugged into the political scene here. He knows everything there is to know about both local and state politics. And so I figured, Jonathan, why don't you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and then kind of go into how you got into this travel hacking thing?
Oh, absolutely. So born and raised here in Niceville, grew up here, went to Blue Water, Ruckle Middle School, Niceville, Collegiate High School, and then went over to Flagler College at St. Augustine and finished up over there. I'm a financial advisor by trade, and so I help people from anything from insurance to investments, retirement planning, educational planning, philanthropic giving, that sort of thing. And so the interesting thing is that what we're talking about today doesn't really have anything to do with my actual job, but just I guess two of my hobbies, if you will. But as far as the travel hacking goes and the way that it kind of all began, I started off in college doing an internship in Jacksonville, and I needed to find a place to stay, but I really didn't have any connections or anybody over there that I knew or whatnot. So ended up staying in a extended stay hotel for like a week, and it was the absolute terriblest experience ever. There were fights in the middle of the night. It was just really really rough. And so I said, something's got to change. There's got to be a better option out here than staying here. I got to find another place because, quite frankly, I don't think it's really safe to stay here. And I was kind of concerned, like, like at night, I would have to like put like the chair in the room up against the back of the door to make sure that people didn't like break in, and people would come by trying to see if the door was like unlocked. I mean, it was a really sketch place. Um, and so I said, there's got to be a better way out here. And so right around this time, like Priceline was kind of becoming a thing where you could name your own price. And so I would get on Priceline and I would find places that I could stay at. Like, wow, I could stay at a 5-star hotel in downtown Jacksonville for like $30 a night. And so that was the same price, if not cheaper, than where I was staying at this extended stay hotel, but it was much nicer. And so I think a lot of it, has to do with, you have to be flexible whenever you're travel hacking. You have to be willing to put yourself probably in some uncomfortable situations. Maybe have to travel back on a day that's not as convenient for you, or you have to be willing to travel to travel. And so what I mean by that is, like, from our area, maybe going to like Atlanta to catch a flight, or to Fort Lauderdale, or to Miami, or Orlando, or New Orleans to catch a flight that is very, very reasonable. But it's definitely worth it, and it's worth the drive, literally to save thousands and thousands of dollars.
And so tell us, I guess, a little bit before we get more in depth about the mechanics of it. What kind of places are we talking about? Are you talking about like a weekend in Orlando, or are we talking about something a little bit more exotic?
Something a little bit more exotic. I would say, like, typically like Europe would be like a go-to place. And I just found one. I'm excited about this. I just found this today. 129 Orlando to London.
Oh
So
wow.
like that's like in 2 weeks. I'm not going there, I'm going somewhere else. But I was like, man, that's what a deal. Like that's the kind of deals that I'm talking about. Like, for instance, last spring break, my family and I, we went to Cairo and to Egypt and visited the pyramids for $200 to get there, and then 200 or so to get back. But mostly what I do is one-way tickets. I have just a little bit better luck with that as far as finding some of these destinations. But my wife and I have been to over 50 countries over the past, I guess, over the past, like, I don't know, 15 years since we've been married. One of our first adventures, we went to Costa Rica kind of on a whim, and I found some cheap tickets. I'm like, we're going. We didn't even have a hotel room booked. But we're like, we're going to figure it out along the way. And we did, and it worked out okay. And she's still married to me, thankfully.
And so you, I guess, how do you book your hotels? So I guess we should probably split this into two things, but
Sure.
how do you plan your how do you determine where you're going to go? How do you buy flights, and then how do you buy your like your hotel lodging?
Yeah. So typically, determining where I want to go, it really comes down to the second part, which is where we're going to go, or what the flights are. And so sometimes I will go and I'll look and see, okay, where can I fly? Um, just I'll explore everywhere. So I use an app called Skyscanner or Google Flights. And Google Flights is incredible because it shows you like visually where you want to, like where you can go in the world for what prices from certain airports. And so I'll plug in VPS and I'll look from there. And a lot of like VPS, some of the places you can go are like on Allegiant flights, which are great. So we've done like Chicago, we've done New York a couple times, Las Vegas several times. But then it's also like, okay, well, I really wanted to go like last May, I really wanted to go to Banff, Canada, like Calgary and Banff. And I knew that you could fly from Vegas to Calgary super cheap, like $25-$30, like super, super cheap. But it was like, well, how do we get to Vegas? Well, Allegiant flies from here to Vegas. It was like $79, and then you add your $30 to that, and you're in Calgary. So I mean, and you're in Banff, and so that's kind of the way that I would do that. And then as far as like where to stay, what I'll do is typically last minute stuff. So I'll look at, and sometimes it's even as like I'm on the plane and I'm flying to Vegas. I don't know where I'm going to stay that night, but I know that there's plenty of hotel rooms available. And for the most part, it's been good, except for one time we ended up with there was some sort of crazy sports conference like in Orlando, and other than that one time, it's been pretty good. And that time we ended up finding a place, but it was like you had to like walk in and say like, "Hey, do you guys have any extra rooms available?" And we were able to get one eventually, but it was very difficult using the typical tools, Priceline, Expedia, stuff like that.
And so, I mean, how many times? So you've had one bad experience. How many times has that happened, or how many times have you gone on trips? Are we talking like, you know, 200 trips and it happened? You had a negative outcome one time. Is it like a 99.5% success rate?
Oh, I would say it's probably I don't know exactly the number of trips, but I know roughly the number of days per year is roughly around 60 days a year of travel. And part of that is and it's kind of funny to say it, but I saw this thing on TikTok one time that it really talked about like how can you expand and utilize vacation time for people who typically have like maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks of like paid time off. Like how do you take the most advantage of that? And so really the key is from this thing I saw on TikTok it is that like anytime you have a holiday, if you can take like the day before, that would count like one day. So like if you have like Martin Luther King Day, if you take off the Friday before, then you have a 4 day trip. And a 4 day trip is great. I mean, those are wonderful. Um, but then you only are missing one day of work. And then for us, it's like spring break with the kids schedule as well. Like we'll take off like maybe the Friday before spring break, and maybe the Monday after. So then you have like a full like 10 days of travel time. And so that's kind of how we've been able to do that as far as just really taking full advantage of holidays.
And so when you go to these places, are you getting a hotel the night of, or are you getting it like a week before? Or are you booking like 3 months out?
So hardly ever 3 months out. The only time I would say that if it was like a place that you're like, we really want to stay at this place, I would probably do that. But mostly a week out to the same day, and somewhere between a week out and the same day is kind of where I've found the sweet spot to be able to get some really really good deals and stay at some pretty cool places.
So between like a day and a week.
Yes.
Okay. Best places that you've been, if you had like a top three, where would you say, or even better, where would you go back to?
Sure. So I would say Thailand was a place that we went that I really really enjoyed. Just thought it was just a really neat place, completely different culture. People are amazing. We got to do we got to like go into a tiger's cage, which was kind of not something you get to do here at the zoo. Like you get to go into a tiger's cage and pet these tigers and take pictures with them and stuff like that, which was pretty cool. So I really enjoyed that a lot. We ended up on that trip. It was like a 9-day Asian trip that we started off in China and worked our way down to through Vietnam and Japan, and then ended up in Singapore. And so that was just a really neat experience, and then in Hong Kong as well. So but that was one of the ones that I would say I definitely want to go back to Asia. Europe is a place too that I definitely would want to go back to. South Africa is on the list. I haven't been there yet, but that's definitely on the list of places to go for sure.
The last time we talked about this, you and I pulled up a map and we found this like place in random like Mali. You remember that? Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, I still think about that. I still
Right.
think about like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get an Allegiant flight to Newark, and from there, we're gonna fly to London. All right, because London has all the flights, or Charles de Gaulle. Then we're gonna go to Senegal. Then we're gonna rent a Land Rover. All right, and we're gonna put like jerry cans on the side. It's just gonna be you and me. It's boys' trip to Mali, because nothing ever bad happens in Mali.
Right.
Definitely not anything going on there right now that would make anybody concerned about you and me, Bubba, in it to Mali. Are you in?
I would go for sure. I mean, there's very few places that I wouldn't go right now. Like, there's just very few places. And part of it too is like with like traveling with children, because we do bring
Mhm.
our kids on most of our trips. And so it's kind of like security concerns sometimes, but there's a couple places my wife was like, absolutely not. So North Korea's on the list of like, we cannot go there.
That's
Um,
ridiculous.
yeah, I just isn't. It just isn't. I don't want to take the risk. Like I would probably. Well, yeah, no, I don't know.
Well, first of all, it's called Best Korea. It's not North Korea. It's Best Korea. They say that all the time. Have you not seen that skit?
Yeah, no,
Um,
no.
so, what about like Turkmenistan?
So some of the stands I would go to, probably Afghanistan right now probably wouldn't be the best place to go with family, but given the current situation there, but there, that's off limits for now. I mean, Syria, Libya. There's definitely a couple places that I would be like, I wouldn't go to. I would go to Iraq right now, though, for sure.
Like, but no active war zones is pretty much what you're saying is your limiter.
Yeah, yeah, and like in like Russia and Ukraine, like right now, wouldn't venture there. We did have an opportunity to go to Russia before the war,
Hmm.
and it was an interesting experience for sure.
Tell me a little bit about like the political, and this might segue us into our next thing. But what was the like political atmosphere like when you were in Russia before the war? Did you like feel it coming, or was it more of a chiller vibe?
No, it was very chill. I mean, you just kind of had to, you just kind of watch yourself a little bit, and just like you do in most foreign countries. I mean, just kind of, keep track of your surroundings and stuff like that. But and the overall, I mean, the people were fairly friendly, and I think it's like one of the things I think I've learned over this travel is that there's a big distinction between the government and the people. Um, and sometimes the situation that people find themselves in isn't representative of how they feel or how they truly feel. And I've seen it, in places like Cuba and Russia, Vietnam, places like that have these communist regimes, but overall the people are really great people, and they have you can kind of talk to them, especially like in Cuba. We talked to them and they would tell us like things that the government doesn't allow them to do, and you're like, wow, you are not allowed to have internet access easily, and if you do have it, it's censored and stuff like that. And but it was interesting that they felt comfortable enough to talk to us
Hmm.
about the problems that they're having, within their country, which is interesting.
Changing gears just a little bit
Sure.
to like traveling with kids. Um, how do you make that work? How do you make it so that, your kids are A, excited to do it, B, can do the long-term travel thing, right? Like going on 9, 10 day trips. And then how do you make it enjoyable for you and your wife?
Yeah, so I think that anywhere you go in the world, I mean, there's definitely most places you go, there are kids there, and there's kids things to do. One of the funniest ones recently, we went to Colombia, and people are like, "You're going to Colombia? You need to leave your kids at home. The place is, scary and dangerous, and there's nothing for kids to do." And I'm like, "Okay, let me do a little research here." And so the other thing too, I utilize a lot is expat Facebook groups.
Okay.
And so I will go before I go somewhere. I'll like send them. I'll join one of these groups, and then I'll ask like, "Hey, what are the top 10 activities to do in Medellin for kids?" And so other people who are parents will like respond back, and they'll say things like, "Oh, well, you need to go um, to this museum or to this aquarium or to the zoo or different types of things like that you would go to." But it's completely just a different experience, and so they really enjoy traveling. My son Nathan has a map in his room with all the countries that he's visited, and and every time we go to one, we'll get the little we'll get like a little thing and scratch it off, or pull up the sticker for each of the places that he's been. And so, we joke around that, the goal is to hit all 200 and something countries. I don't know if we'll get there, but definitely enjoy the experience for sure.
What is the one place that is so ridiculous that you think you may not be able to get there that is not an active war zone?
Oh, that is not an active war zone.
Yes.
I mean, that's tough. So Antarctica is up there as a place that would be difficult. I mean, there are cruises, there are people that make expeditions and stuff like that down there, and there's like people that enjoy doing that. The problem with those cruises, though, is they're very very small ships and they're very very expensive. But
Mhm.
I think as far as a bucket list item, I mean, that would be kind of neat to visit all seven continents for sure.
I've always wanted to go to like those little micro islands out in the Pacific, like go to Tuvalu or
Oh yeah,
Nauru and just like see what's up, you know?
yeah,
Because I feel like that's not a place that like people get to go to.
right.
And I gotta think it's just gotta be absolutely wild to be there. Like when we were talking about, or when they were talking about the primaries, the Super Tuesday primaries, and they were talking about American Samoa,
Hmm.
right? And it's one of
Yeah,
those places where like I don't know what's going on over there, and it's an American territory, right? But
right,
like they have, it's so different that like Joe Biden lost the American Samoa primary,
right.
by
To an
what?
unknown candidate, it's a big deal.
Yeah, like it was like 51 votes to 46 votes or something like that. And I just want to know like what is going on over there. This guy that I've never heard of won this primary, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Uh,
definitely, I mean, definitely like the primaries in those and some of the U.S. territories and stuff like that. Like on the Republican side, always one of the stops is like the Virgin Islands. That's always one of the stops. I think like 2008, Rick Santorum. That was one of his stops that he went there and campaigned to try to get some delegates to get him to where he needed to be.
and
Obviously, it didn't work out for him, but
well, hey,
it's interesting.
you say it didn't work out, but the guy went to the Virgin Islands as a work trip.
Sure,
Like, so maybe the outcome wasn't great, but the individual Virgin Island excursion doesn't seem so bad.
right.
But so I guess coming a little bit closer to home, you have a lot of experience in politics. You've run for county commissioner and well, I guess briefly, right? And then for state representative. Tell me a little bit about the process of going to run for office and why you have decided to run for office in the past and possibly the future.
Right. So, you know, I think initially, it's just kind of a calling for me. I mean, is initially is why I got into it, and just kind of really caring and concerned about the future for our children in the Florida that we leave them. I mean, there's the Florida of that I grew up in is different than the Florida today, and so my concern is as time progresses and some of the decisions that we're making today, we definitely need to make sure that we're thinking about the next generation and the generation after that, as far as some of the things that we do. And so I ran in 2016, and you didn't really know much at all about politics at that point. Just knew that I really wanted to serve, and went and was told, hey, if you knock on doors and you get to see people at their doorstep, that's the best way to make an impression, to have people learn about your platform, and kind of go from there. And so I started knocking on doors, and started off on the weekends, and then as we get closer and closer to the election, we just start knocking. We just continue knocking on doors, and speaking with people, and kind of hearing their concerns. And some of them were fascinating. Some of them were, hey, my kid has having problems at school. I don't know who to talk to. It's like, oh, well, you need to talk to the principal at the school. Here's what school you're zoned for, and here's your principal, and here's your contact information, and things like that. It's like, wow, we're really making a difference in that person's life, and so there were several situations like that, just from going door to door and asking people kind of what their top issues were. So.
And as we look at I guess the state in general, we've seen kind of a rightward trend right over the last two election cycles. The first time that Ron DeSantis was elected, he won by 0.5%, right? And then in 2022, he won by 18%. I mean, that's a huge trend change over the last 8 years. What do you think has happened, and how has Florida changed in those 8 years?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of different factors at play. One is, I think that if you look at the platform, of less government, less regulation, um, reducing taxes, keeping our schools open during the COVID situation, I think that was very, very significant. And the approach to during the pandemic was very different than a lot of states. And kind of looking back on it, I think that's a lot of what happened, as far as uh, growth of the party, during that time period. And I think really the other big difference too, and I've seen this in New York. Just kind of comparing the two. New York has like double the amount of taxes as Florida, and but like the same number of people, and so they're literally paying twice as much in New York compared to Florida. But um, it's a lawless city, and literally would see crime. I was up there, I guess last year before last, helping with some family type things, and um, we were sitting down having like lunch, and some like homeless person came by and just reached into the table, like two tables next to us, and just grabbed like this drink and just pushed it over on people. And I'm like, in Florida, man, that's like assault and battery. Like that's a big deal. And the police just let the guy go. And I'm like, "Yeah, are you kidding me? Like this is a big deal." And so it's like, I think the little things like that. The subways aren't safe up there. I mean, there's a lot of contrast, but I think that the governor has done a pretty good job of keeping our city safe. And I think that's really the big difference is public safety. And I think the other thing that you'll start seeing more of a trend on, as far as for even further push to the right, I think the economy is significantly, right now, the rising cost of things. There's a lot of things that are being more and more expensive, insurance premiums, things like that. And I think a lot of that kind of what's um, comes back to what we're seeing at the national level. And having Joe Biden in the White House, I think that people are really starting to see that. I just saw a poll today that came out from the New York Times. 97% of Trump voters who voted in 2020 for Trump are going to stay with him. 85% of voters who voted for Biden are with him. So that's a major issue. And I think if I were to call it right now, I think Trump wins in November.
Do you see the so I guess on the economic part, right? I think the only thing I would push back on is the the market seems the stock market, right, seems to be doing really well. And is it a perception issue, I guess, for the White House at this point?
Well, I think that the stock market is doing well, but I'd be curious to see how well it could do if we didn't have the inflation, because I think that it could be significantly better than where we're at right now, with some of those changes, being put in place.
Um, as the other, I guess, question I would have on the state of Florida specifically is, I my understanding is that we had a pretty big influx of people moving from other states to New York or to
From
Florida
Yeah,
during the pandemic.
sure,
Is Would you argue? Because I would argue in my mind that that's a big reason why we've seen a rightward tack here in the state of Florida, is because of I would say it's pretty big migration. Like if we look at Niceville, I think we gained like 600 or 700 people in a town of 16,000 people over that year and a half period.
right, right. Yeah, I definitely think that, and so they're fleeing these high tax states. There's a lot of reasons why people are coming here. I mean, the state income tax, not having a state income tax in Florida like they do in New York and some of these other places, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, absolutely. That's a reason why people are coming here, and looking to retire here too. And I think that that's one of the things that you'll see. There at the peak, we were looking at 1,000 people a day moving to the state of Florida, and that's continued on. And so, if you think 1,000 people a day, that's 1,000 moving vans, 1,000 U-Hauls every single day that are coming across our northern border somewhere, for people to live. And I think that's one of the reasons too, that we've seen this increase in our property values and whatnot too. Supply and demand type of issue too going on with that. So, and getting to that, like more on the local level too, if it's all right to
Oh
speak
yeah.
on that. Recently I got this email, that said, "We are keeping our millage rates the same. Everything's great. We're keeping them the same." But the very next paragraph, it said, "Good news. Property values have increased 10%." And so what that tells me is that our taxes essentially have gone up 10% at the county level. I don't know if you followed it or gotten your most recent tax statement, but that's a really really big increase in 1 year. Um, and so I think that that's something that, just being involved locally, and that's something that I think that we as citizens should really look at and see and understand a little bit better about where our tax dollars really are going, and making sure that we're good stewards, of those tax dollars. And so that's definitely something that I think is kind of a concern locally, and seeing the amount of increase at the county level, for instance, of
So,
how. Go ahead.
oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. I
I
was
was just
just going to say we have two races that are coming up.
sure.
The school board race and the county commission race, and they both have a lot to do with property taxes. That's how they're primarily funded.
Right.
And so I figured this is a great segue to talk about um, these elections that are going to be in August and what they mean for people personally.
Right. And so I think that, there's two major races, right now. I pull this stuff up and look at it all the time, as far as, who's in the races right now, and what's going on in Okaloosa County. And if it's okay with you, I don't know if we're good in time wise, but I'll just run
Oh
through them
yeah,
all real quick,
yeah.
with you here. So right now, clerk of court, JD Peacock is retiring. So right now, there's only one person that is running for that. Brad Embry, is running for that. I can't believe it's already been 4 years, for Commissioner District 1. Paul Mixon, is up for reelection, and personally, I think he's done a pretty good job. The most contentious race for county commissioner, as of right now, is District 3, which is part of Crestview, and also, part of East Niceville. I believe that's
And
right.
so it's the
Southwest.
most the current holder, Nathan Boyles, calls it the most gerrymandered district in Okaloosa County. It is Western Crestview, Baker, Western Niceville, Valparaiso, and then there's like a little cutout of Fort Walton Beach that's randomly a part of it.
Gotcha.
And so it is a little bit of everything. And so if you live west of State Route, I think it's 285. It's Parton Drive. If you live west of Parton Drive, then you're in District 3. But of course, you get to vote for all district commissioners.
Right. And so that race is interesting. There's 3 candidates in there right now. Sherry Cox, who is a committee woman. You have Wade Merritt. Well, I apologize, Wade. I do not know. I've not met him. Andrew Rinsich. Rinsich? Is that
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So Andrew owns a tactical in Crestview. He's a city councilman. And one of the things that I've had some experience working with Andrew and just kind of seeing him a little bit is working with Tim Bullock of the city of Crestview and kind of seeing some of the things that they've done there. And some of the things that they had to do in Crestview because they were having problems attracting businesses is they had to change some of the alcohol ordinances and the zoning requirements to allow establishments to serve alcohol. And so that has some of the changes that he was instrumental in making helped make way for additional businesses and whatnot in the city of Crestview, which is pretty neat, neat for sure. And so let's see here. And then we'll get into from there. Property appraiser Mac Busby's up for re-election as well. As far as a committee man and committee woman, it's interesting for the Republican Party. Marvin Brigman and Cheryl Stubbs are both running unopposed right now for that. Okay. And then getting into the school board District 2, that's Parker Destin and David Schmidt. In full disclosure, too, I did make a contribution to Parker Destin on this, and the reason for that is just I've known him for a long time, and I think that he's going to do some really good things. And Parker, along with Marcus Chambers, superintendent of school, is also up for re-election too. And I've made it known to both of them my beef I have with our school system in regards to portable classrooms. 1997, whenever I was at Blue Water Elementary, they brought in the first portable classroom 27 years ago. I thought for sure that the portable classrooms would be gone by now. Unfortunately, they're still there. And it's like you're telling me in 27 years, with the amount of tax dollars raised in the county, that we haven't been able to solve this problem for this school. And so I think that all schools need to have a plan of like what they want, when they want to, and I'm sure that some of them do, but also looking at like just from at what point do you stop and rebuild a school versus continuing to put patches on a building that's significantly old. Ruckle Middle School, I kid you not, there's a mat whenever you enter one of I think it's a gymnasium, it's like class of 1982. That was their gift to the school, and it's still there, which I don't know what they don't make mats like they used to, but that's like, come on guys, like that's something that should have been taken care of, like, I don't know, like 10 years later or something. And so I think that having a schedule of when we retire certain buildings, when we build new buildings, I think that's very, very important, because these portable classrooms at Blue Water, they've gone from 1 in 1997, now we're up to like 8. I mean, like, we can do better than that. I mean, meanwhile, and I understand it's 2 different separate sources of funding, but if we're using TDC dollars to build statues on Okaloosa Island, we ought to be able to create a school that is going to make sense, and to create a proper classroom for our children, that they don't have to leave when there's severe weather, that they're able to stay in, and not have their day interrupted. And so I think that that's something we can do a little bit better too, but I'll get off my soapbox on that.
No, I think this is a really good point, because it comes down to a funding issue, right?
Sure.
I think so. The last time it was quoted to me by the school district An elementary school can cost somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 million bucks. Middle school is about double that, and then high school is about 120 million dollars. Those are the price tags they gave me.
Sure.
I don't source school purchases, so I don't want to sit here and tell you that's gospel. But with the relative expense for that, right? There's 38 different schools in the district right now. How do we get the money to buy new schools? I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking if we need a replacement plan, all these schools are 50 years old. How do we do this without raising taxes?
Right. I think you finance them. I mean, I think the same exact way that a business would go about buying a building, a commercial building, or the same way that a homeowner would go about buying a house. If you don't have the money now and can't afford it, you don't want to raise taxes, then I think that the next best thing is to figure out, okay, well, what are our lending options, and they can do that through municipal bonds that could fund some of these buildings where we can at least start, and we don't have to do them all today. I mean, I'm not saying that we should do all of them today, but I think that we at least have a plan in place that says, okay, let's do on this date. Niceville High School is going to go out of service, and if you look at the job that Northwest Florida State College has done. I mean, look at that campus and compare that campus with Lewis School or with Ruckle Middle School. Like night and day. It's unbelievable. But I think there's also room too, working with federal partners, with the military, and maybe we don't have the land for a school, but maybe there's surplus land that we could utilize for a school building. I think even working with the county, and the county's proven precedence with this, with Destin Elementary School land purchase, that they were instrumental in helping assist the school district purchase. And so I would say too, and I would make the argument that if we're utilizing TDC dollars for statues in a park to bring people in the area, I would say that making sure that we have good schools that benefit us, I think that does drive tourism to an extent. Now it might be a big leap, but to get there, but I think that it definitely has an impact on our area, and it does affect property values by making sure we have good schools. And so those are some issues that I would say that that are important that we could focus on there. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's a long-term sell, right? Because at least in my mind, this is how I would sell it. We use the TDC money because we need to have a workforce that's available, right? In order to work in these tourism adjacent or tourism industries. Like you said, might be a hard sell. State government might not love it, but it might work.
Well, and here's the thing too, is that that people forget is that the state government, laws are laws today. Laws can change.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime I hear the notion of, oh, we can't do that, we can't do this because it's not what the law allows, I'm like, correct. The law doesn't allow that today. But that's why we have representatives that can go and change the laws and can go and take the issue before the legislature and get those laws changed or amended however we deem fit. And that's part of our governmental structure. That's how that's how it works.
So take the statue money and make it school money.
Well, I mean, that is definitely a possibility or of a solution right there.
But Jonathan, what if we don't have money for more statues?
Well, I think we do.
Here's to hoping, my friend, because I can't live without a good statue in my life. People
Right.
know this about me. But yeah, so we've talked a little bit, I guess, about the school district. Let's talk a little bit about the Board of County Commissioners. What are you looking for with these candidates to earn your vote?
Sure. So I think it really comes down to, for me, it comes down to business experience. That's important. Because I think that the more and more we run government like a business and not a government, the better. I mean, just looking at the crazy amounts of money that the federal government prints. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I think that the more longer that people are around government, I think the more and more um, delusional they are at a certain extent. And so that's one of the things too, as far as term limits. And I think that would be a very, very good thing to bring before the legislature too. And that there has been some bills this year even as far as putting some term limits in place for local county commissions and school boards and whatnot too. And I think that's something that could be pretty beneficial going forward too. So that way you have the opportunity for people that maybe don't come from uh, being in government that go
Yeah.
on to serve. And I think it allows more people with a business background and a business mindset to serve. And so those are some of the things that I'm looking for. And I think somebody who's going to keep taxes low and is going to really make sure that there isn't wasteful spending. I understand that taxes are a thing and they have to they're the funding source, but I think what people don't like is whenever taxes are wasted or spent on specific specific ways that really doesn't make a difference to our
So
day-to-day.
I'm interested by your idea of term limits because I'm kind of of two minds of on this situation personally. Of one mind, I'm nervous about term limits because I don't want to. I feel like that disenfranchises people a little bit. Like if somebody's really good and people want to keep voting for them, great. But on the other hand, I see a lot of, and we've talked about this at Niceville City Council probably a dozen times in the last year. Somebody's brought it up that people don't run against incumbents typically in local government, right? And so, and maybe we just have really good people all the time. Um, and I don't want to say that that's not necessarily the case, but I do think it's interesting, right? Um, so two people are coming off the Niceville City Council next year, and both have announced that they're not going to run. And so now they're kind of expecting an avalanche of people out to run for these two seats, right?
Right.
And I I kind of wonder and I worry, like, if we're not challenging incumbents, what's keeping everybody above board, right? Like for example, Paul Mixon's not nobody's running against Paul Mixon, and that's not a bad thing necessarily, right? I think Paul does a great job. That's just one man's opinion. But I'm concerned that like if everybody gives the incumbent the benefit of the doubt and there's nobody challenging them, not necessarily so that they can, get rid of everybody, all the government people are bad, but if you don't have, an exchange of ideas happening, I think that can be an eventual threat. And so I guess in my mind, I'm kind of like worried, like which side has precedence.
Right. And I think that regardless of who's running, I think that it's making sure that the people are accessible and they're doing their job. If they're not accessible, if they're not picking up the phone whenever you call them or getting things done, I'll give you a great example. I had a huge pothole in front of my neighborhood, and I called Mel Ponder, and I was like, "Hey Mel, we got this big problem out here." And he got it took a few days, but he was able to get it taken care of. And so I think that's kind of one of the things that you can measure is how accessible they are, how willing they are to help you with whatever specific needs you are, and also how receptive they are to listen to you too. I think that's also important too, as far as like what to look for in a candidate. And so I think those are all things that um, the community should look at. But it's great. I'm happy to hear that there's a lot of interest in that the Niceville City Council seats. I think it's a good thing whenever you have a lot of people interested in it. I think that when you have a lot of people in a political race, it's a good thing because you could really um, you could really express your opinions or your ideas, and I think there's a lot of room for collaboration there too. And I think that the people um, who do best politically are the ones that it's not about them. It doesn't matter if you win or lose in the race if you're still willing um, to work with the person who wins and still help them and help bring forth good policy. I think that's important. So,
Jonathan, where can people find you and reach out to you if they have more questions about financial planning or about politics or about travel hacking?
Yeah, for sure. So they can reach me. Just send me an email. It's you can give me a call too. But the email it's jtallman at thetallmangroup.com, or you can email me. Or I'm sorry, or you can call me 850-830-4110. That's my personal cell. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Perfect. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'm pausing it.